Hello fellow gardeners, and welcome back to the Humus Heritage. If you've been faithfully tending your compost pile, believing you're doing everything right, yet your garden still isn't thriving the way you expected, you're not alone. Everyone talks about the magic of compost, that coveted black gold that promises to transform any garden into a lush paradise. But here's the truth, nobody wants to admit. Improper composting can actually sabotage your garden's potential. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the dark side of composting, revealing 10 critical mistakes that could be turning your garden asset into a liability. So, get ready to revolutionize your composting game and unlock the explosive growth your garden deserves. The invisible thief in your compost. You've been diligently adding kitchen scraps to your bin, turning your pile occasionally, and waiting patiently for that rich, crumbly compost. You spread it lovingly around your plants, expecting miracles, but instead your tomatoes remain stunted, your lettuce yellows inexplicably, and your soil still looks lifeless. What's happening? The uncomfortable reality is that bad compost isn't just ineffective, it can actively harm your garden. Dead compost that's locked up with the wrong materials, or compost teeming with pathogens doesn't feed your plants, it starves them, introduces disease, and creates an environment where nothing can flourish. The subtle signs are everywhere if you know where to look. A sour smell emanating from your pile, persistent weeds sprouting wherever you've applied your compost, or that nagging feeling that despite all your efforts, your garden soil feels depleted rather than enriched. The truth is, you're likely making at least a few of these critical errors right now, and they're quietly undermining everything you're working toward. Decoding the compost crypt. The first mistake that plagues countless gardeners is the dreaded imbalance between nitrogen-rich greens and carbon-rich browns. When your pile reeks of ammonia or sewage rather than smelling like a forest floor, you've created an anaerobic nightmare. Too many fresh grass clippings and kitchen scraps without enough dried leaves, shredded cardboard or newspaper have essentially suffocated your compost. The microorganisms that should be breaking down your materials can't function without oxygen, and, instead of decomposition, you get putrefaction. The fix requires immediate action. Turn your pile vigorously with a garden fork to introduce oxygen, then layer in abundant dry materials to absorb excess moisture and restore balance. This isn't just about eliminating odor, it's about creating the aerobic conditions where beneficial bacteria can thrive and transform your waste into garden gold. The second critical error involves adding the wrong materials entirely. Many well-intentioned gardeners toss meat scraps, dairy products, oily foods, and pet waste into their piles, thinking all organic matter is fair game. This is a catastrophic mistake. These materials not only attract rats, raccoons, and other pests that will tear through your carefully constructed pile, but they also introduce harmful pathogens that survive the composting process and later contaminate your vegetables. In your garden, this manifests as unexplained disease outbreaks, persistent pest problems, and the disheartening experience of losing entire crops to bacterial or fungal infections that originated in your compost. The solution is straightforward but non-negotiable. Stick exclusively to fruit and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, and untreated plant matter. Always bury fresh kitchen additions deep in the center of your pile and cover them thoroughly with browns to eliminate surface odors that attract unwanted visitors. The third mistake in this trio of common culprits is poor aeration combined with improper moisture levels. A compost pile that's either bone dry or waterlogged creates an environment where decomposition grinds to a halt. When your pile resembles a static heap of recognizable materials that haven't changed in months, you're witnessing the consequences of neglecting these fundamental elements. Microorganisms need moisture to survive and oxygen to function efficiently. A pile that's too dry stops decomposing entirely because the microbes simply die off. Conversely, a soggy, compacted pile becomes a dense, slimy mess where anaerobic conditions prevail, producing that characteristic rotten egg smell and turning your would-be garden amendment into toxic sludge. Your compost should feel like a wrung-out sponge, moist but not dripping. Regular turning introduces the oxygen that accelerates decomposition and prevents compaction, while monitoring moisture levels ensures conditions remain optimal for microbial activity. The hidden saboteurs. Moving beyond the basics, the fourth problem involves creating a pest haven through improper management. It's not just about what you add but how you add it. Leaving food scraps exposed on the surface or failing to secure your composting system with proper barriers turns your pile into an all-you-can-eat buffet for rodents and larger animals. In your garden, this translates to increased pest populations that don't stop at your compost bin. They move into your vegetable beds, tunneling under roots, gnawing on ripening fruit, and spreading disease throughout your growing space. The solution requires multiple layers of protection. Use a closed bin with a tight-fitting lid. Surround open piles with wire mesh, and always bury new additions deep within the pile's hot center where decomposition is most active. The fifth mistake centers on temperature management, particularly relevant for those attempting hot composting. A pile that never heats up becomes a breeding ground for problems. When your compost doesn't reach temperatures between 135 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, weed seeds survive, pathogens persist, and the finished product becomes a vehicle for introducing problems rather than solutions into your garden. This manifests as weeds sprouting wherever you've applied your compost, turning your garden maintenance into an endless battle. The pile needs sufficient mass, at least 3 feet in all dimensions, to generate and retain heat. It needs the right nitrogen boost from fresh grass clippings or coffee grounds, adequate moisture throughout, and regular turning to maintain those critical temperatures. Without proper heat, you're essentially creating a weed seed bank that you'll later distribute throughout your garden with your own hands. The sixth problem involves the insidious issue of nutrient lockout caused by immature or contaminated compost. When you apply compost that hasn't fully decomposed, the ongoing breakdown process in your soil actually robs nitrogen from your plants, leaving them stunted and yellowing despite your fertilization efforts. This is particularly common when gardeners are impatient and spread coarse, barely decomposed material that still contains recognizable chunks of the original ingredients. Your plants compete with the decomposing material for available nitrogen, and they lose. Additionally, if you've added chemically treated yard waste or materials contaminated with herbicides, those chemicals persist in your finished compost and damage or kill sensitive plants when applied. The solution demands patience and education. Let your compost mature fully until it's dark, crumbly, and earthy smelling, with no recognizable original materials. Learn which materials are safe for your specific composting method and reject anything that might carry persistent chemicals. So, the seventh hidden saboteur is what I like to call the single bin syndrome. You know, a lot of gardeners start out with just one bin or pile and try to manage both active composting and harvesting finished product in the exact same spot. This really leads to a lot of inefficiency and, honestly, confusion, because you're always adding fresh material to compost that's only partly finished. That makes it, well, pretty much impossible to harvest mature compost without messing up the rest of the process. In practice, what ends up happening is, you're often forced to use compost before it's truly ready, which, brings us right back to those nutrient lockout and weed seed problems we talked about earlier. The real breakthrough comes from thinking in systems, not just single units. A 3-bin approach is a total game changer. You've got 1 bin for active composting where you're adding and turning material regularly, 1 for maturing compost that you leave alone to finish, and 1 for fresh stuff that hasn't even started breaking down yet. This rotation, honestly, ensures you always have finished compost ready when your garden needs it, and it keeps the whole production cycle running smoothly and efficiently. Alchemy, or turning trash to treasure, is really what composting is all about. But the 8th mistake folks make is ignoring moisture management as an active, ongoing practice. A lot of gardeners, honestly, just add their materials and walk away, leaving the pile at the mercy of whatever weather comes along. During dry spells, the pile dries out and, well, decomposition just grinds to a halt. On the flip side, when it rains a lot, the pile can get waterlogged and turn anaerobic, which is definitely not what you want. Real composting alchemy, though, requires paying attention to moisture levels all the way through. Check your pile regularly, add water during those dry periods until it feels kind of like a wrung-out sponge, or toss in some dry browns after heavy rains to soak up the extra moisture. And, covering your pile with a tarp or a lid can really help keep the moisture consistent no matter what the weather's doing. This kind of active management is what turns sporadic decomposition into a reliable, efficient process. The 8th mistake, and it's a big one, is ignoring moisture management as an active, ongoing practice. A lot of gardeners, honestly, just add new materials and then leave their pile to whatever weather happens to hit. When it's dry out, the pile can desiccate, and, well, decomposition just stops altogether. When it's rainy, the pile can get waterlogged and go anaerobic, which is a real problem. True composting alchemy, though, means paying attention to those moisture levels throughout the whole process. So, check your pile on a regular basis. Add water during dry spells until it's got that sponge-like feel, or mix in some dry browns after heavy rains to absorb all that extra moisture. And covering your pile with a tarp, or lid, is a great way to keep things consistent, no matter what the weather's doing. This kind of hands-on management is what transforms sporadic decomposition into a process that's reliable and efficient every single time. The ninth problem is neglecting the turning schedule. You know, decomposition isn't a passive process. It really requires your participation. A pile that's never turned develops hot spots in the center, while the outer layers just stay cool and unchanged. Turning, well, it redistributes heat, introduces oxygen to those anaerobic pockets, and it actually accelerates decomposition throughout the entire mass. For hot composting, you should turn your pile every few days during the initial heating phase, and then weekly as it matures. Even cold composting benefits from monthly turning, just to prevent compaction and maintain good airflow. Yes, it's work, but honestly, it's the difference between waiting a year for mediocre compost and producing rich, finished compost in just a few months. The 10th and final mistake is failing to optimize particle size. Tossing whole corn cobs, intact branches, and large vegetable chunks into your pile dramatically slows decomposition because microorganisms can only work on surface area. A whole potato might take 6 months to break down, while that same potato chopped into small pieces disappears in weeks. Before adding materials to your pile, take a moment to chop, shred, or break them into smaller pieces. This simple step exponentially increases the surface area available for microbial action, accelerating the entire composting process and ensuring more uniform decomposition. We've journeyed through the 10 critical mistakes that transform potential garden gold into garden grief: imbalanced materials, wrong ingredients, poor aeration, pest attraction, inadequate heating, nutrient lockout, single bin limitations, moisture neglect, insufficient turning, oversized particles. Armed with this knowledge, you're no longer composting blindly. You understand that creating truly beneficial compost requires attention to the balance of materials, active management of moisture and aeration, patience for proper maturation and systematic organization of your composting space. These aren't just theoretical concepts. They're practical, actionable changes you can implement immediately to transform your composting results. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to assess your current composting practice against these 10 problems. Identify where you're falling short and commit to making corrections this week. Turn that stagnant pile, add those missing browns, chop those oversized additions, or plan your 3-bin system. Your garden's future abundance depends on the quality of the compost you create today. The transformation won't happen overnight, but within a few months, you'll see the difference in your soil structure, plant vigor, and harvest abundance. If this guide has opened your eyes to the hidden problems sabotaging your composting success, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button so you never miss our weekly gardening wisdom, and share this video with every gardener you know who's struggling with their compost. Drop a comment below telling me which of these 10 mistakes you've been making and what changes you're committing to today. Together, we're building a community of informed, successful gardeners who understand that true garden gold isn't accidental. It's intentional, knowledgeable, and absolutely achievable. Now get out there and transform that compost pile into the garden powerhouse it was always meant to be.